lifts us back up from the short person here. Okay, so why threat intelligence without relevance really isn't smart. I'm going to talk about 4 numbers that you may be familiar with, probably the first 2 very familiar with, those will be the basis for the brief conversation I'm going to have with you. 200 days, probably you're all familiar with. That's what most studies have shown an attacker dwell time is once they've gotten past your sort of initial security detection and defense systems you have in your environment. So about 200 days is the amount of time they're in there before somebody else tells you, oh, hey, by the way, you've been hacked. 90 days is the amount of data that, the way we surveyed a lot of agencies and a lot of commercial customers, 90 days is the amount of data that most of them have in their security information event management systems, about 90 days. So already you begin to see a problem with the delta between the amount of live data that those organizations are keeping online and the length of time that an attacker on average is inside of your network before they're discovered. Now the last 2 numbers are a little bit different. And the last 2 numbers are ours at Anomali. And what we do is we're curating threat intelligence data. We have a threat intelligence platform, and we curate massive amounts of threat intelligence data, about 230 different open source feeds, and also we work with all of the commercial providers of threat intelligence data. And the company's been in existence at about 2 years. And when it started, we were able to, from threat intelligence data, from those million pieces of malware that the deputy director mentioned earlier in his talk, we've been able to accumulate what are called indicators of compromise. And indicators of compromise, for us, the primary ones are email addresses, IP addresses, URLs, domains, and hashes. And what we do is we take that information from all of the threat intelligence data, and when we started the company 2 years ago, we had about 100,000 of these things, these pieces of information. We, as of today, have curated over 100 million of these particular pieces of information. About 30 million we list as active today, and active meaning that if you see some sort of a correlation between an IP address or a URL, somebody actually surfing to a particular URL that we have in our data, that's probably not good. That's a bad thing. That's a known bad in our business. And that growth rate between when we started and now is about 39% a month. And that trend has been continuing onward at that clip for the last 2 years. And we see that continuing into the future. Not only that, the ratio of threat intelligence IOCs, indicators of compromise that we've collected, is in lockstep with that active number, because we are rolling off indicators of compromise as they age out of the system or they become not relevant. A couple of the reasons that we've gotten so many, first of all, attackers are using domain generation algorithms now, very sophisticated, to simply generate random domains for people to be able to surf to and embed those inside of malware or inside of malicious code. We see all of the new malware that's been created, and we have malware sandboxes that are diagnosing and dissecting that malware, everything from academia all the way to commercial. And that 39% a month was particularly frightening. We really hadn't even looked at the clip at which indicators of compromise are being collected and curated in the industry. So this causes a lot of problems. First of all, always the same problems, right? You've got people, process, and technology problems that are caused by this massive amount of data that basically what we're asking you to do is to take 25 million of something, hold it in memory inside of a security information and event management system, and then hope that you're going to get some sort of a match along the way. And typically what happens is 25 million of something loaded into memory is not going to work. So technology is already a problem. We've got a scale problem of a different kind, or a big data problem of a different kind on the technology side. The people thing is broken simply because we're looking at an incredible amount of information that we really don't know how relevant it is to your organization at any given point in time. If I hand you 25 million of something and say, hey, find out what matters, it's going to take you a long time. That's not something that you're going to be able to do as a person or as even a team of individuals in any given amount of time. And then the process is also broken because while it may be great for me as a threat analyst for you to hand me 25 million of something and ask me to go through all of that and ask me to figure all this out, it's probably not good for your security operations team who's really working in the now and working with live data and trying to figure out whether or not they need to be aware of something that's going on inside your environment. So really, too much data really is less useful for people. It does break down security processes, and it really can't be processed by technology. So we had an idea. We were talking about it a couple of weeks ago, and what we're trying to do is we're trying to push all of this into the Security Information Event Management System. And recently, the user behavior analytics software companies are taking data from the SIM, analyzing that somewhere else, and delivering answers back to the SIM. And we thought, well, that makes perfect sense to us. So why doesn't a threat intelligence platform have the capability to read your log data, find out exactly what matters, match that to the library of IOCs that we have, and then bring that back to you and say, okay, here are the 100 or so out of the 25 million that make sense for you. Here are the ones that are in real time valid based on your data, eliminating millions of false positives and giving you just the true positives, the things that you need to be aware of. So what we're doing is we're collecting log data, we're reading that data, we're putting into the threat intelligence platform, comparing that against a library, sending back the positive matches, and then reducing these tens of millions of indicators down to really only the things that matter. So this big idea has big benefits. The first one is it does create significant alignment, and we've seen this in a number of our customers who say suddenly the security operations team is actually talking to the threat analysts, because as soon as the security operations team sees a correlation between an IOC, a known bad thing, and they see that correlation happen in their system, one of those couple of hundred in the system, they automatically pick up the phone and they call the threat analyst and say, hey, I see a positive match here between threat intelligence data and what we have going on in our systems. And so I need to know what's the campaign, where is this coming from, what sort of techniques and processes and procedures is the attacker using. They're all of a sudden asking important questions of the threat analyst and actually prioritizing the threat analyst's work, going from those 25 million or 30 million active things they're looking at down to only those things that are relevant at any given time for their organization. Gartner, about 2 years ago, came out with something called the intelligence-driven SOC. And that idea isn't talked about that much anymore because it's not really practical with all of the IOCs that are out there, all of the information that's out there for you to be able to try to put inside of a security information event management system that runs those SOCs. So now what we do is if we can create the right scale, if we can actually just provide the things that are relevant, then we can actually create that intelligence-driven SOC and actually facilitate that. And then we can actually scale because we're only collecting a small slice of the data that we need to do the analysis and putting that over back into the SIM. What we're able to actually do is look across longer time periods. So if we see that delta between that 200 days and that 90, we're actually able to go back a year and look for correlations between threat intelligence data happening right now and something that happened well over 200 days ago, and create that particular correlation and take a look at it and say, hey, you've had somebody in your network for a very long time who's been laying low, and now suddenly we have a new piece of threat intelligence data out there that you can actually compare to inside of your organization. And then finally, faster detection across the entire attack chain. Because if we look at the attack chain and how attackers are actually going through all the stages along that chain, there are IOCs, potential IOCs inside of your networks right now that are being used that can be positive matches against threat intelligence data all across the entire chain. So it gives you lots of opportunities over that window, over that attacker dwell time, to be able to find that attacker and identify them and figure out what to do about them. IP addresses, emails, domains, hashes, URLs are all active across the entire sequence. So that's really the end of my talk today. If you want to talk about this sort of idea, if you want to talk about this sort of concept and how it's applied and some of the success stories we've been able to have with it, please do visit us out in the other area. We're really proud to be a sponsor of this organization, and I couldn't have had a better setup from the Deputy Director for this particular talk. Thanks, I appreciate it.